Let's listen to what Joe Biden said to me back in March. This was the day before the Michigan primary. I interviewed him in Michigan about the vice presidential choice. Let's listen to what he said about that then. In your experience, and I mean your lifetime of political experience and watching this choice made, a running mate, do you think that it's important that it be someone who actually has been tested on that presidential debate stage the way I assume Barack Obama thought it was very important that his vice presidential candidate had already been tested at that level as you were standing beside him on the debate stage?
I think that's a very important factor.
Very important factor. And we're going to leave it at that today?
Yes.
Okay.
By the way, there's a number of women as well who've been tested in other ways, not on the debate stage, but in their debates in their states and being in national figures. So, but yes, I think that's an important factor.
Zerlina, there's Joe Biden saying it's a very important factor that the vice presidential nominee has already been tested at the presidential debate stage level. That sure gives a big advantage to Senator Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I do think that that particular bit there does give an advantage to Senator Kamala Harris. And I do think that, one of the things that people look at differently now in the context of the race for vice president is their exchange in the first Democratic primary debate, where she stood up to him on the issue of busing. Now, the merits of the debate and sort of the context of what they were debating in that moment, people really don't forget that. But what they remember is when she stood up to him and said, "That little girl was me." That was a moment that even though her campaign did not go the full distance, people respected the fact that she stood up to the front runner. And he was, the front runner most of the primary until sort of the Bernie surge in the late stages there. So at the time, think about how much guts it took to really go to a debate and debate as if you wanted the top job as president and you were unafraid to stand up to a former vice president and the front runner. So I think that puts her ahead. But I also don't want to dismiss folks who weren't on that stage, like Congresswoman Val Demings or Stacey Abrams from Georgia, because a lot of folks, jump forward and say, well, this person doesn't have enough experience. That person has the more specific experience that we're looking for in a vice president. But I just want to remind everybody that Donald Trump is the president. And so I don't know why we do that when we are talking about women or Black people being in positions of power when we haven't done that on the other side. Currently, Donald Trump is the president during a global pandemic where he has previously told people to inject disinfectant. And so I'm certainly not going to get into a serious game of analysis about whether or not Stacey Abrams is more competent than that person. And so I just want to say that all of the women that he has to choose from are equally valuable and equitable in terms of being able to be in that position.